Namaskar. Today I'm going to talk about a brief introduction to certain basics of one of the most important philosophical concept that we commonly know as existentialism. This philosophy, in terms of 20th century, has deeply affected and impressed various kinds of writing styles and various literary genres. In this talk, I shall be talking about this philosophy specifically in terms of theatre, drama, and especially the dramatist Samuel Beckett and his masterpiece Waiting for Godot, which is an existential play. So, before we take a plunge into the text that is Waiting for Godot, it becomes but necessary to know some things, some concepts of this philosophy to understand the text more clearer. So, as I said, the philosophy of existentialism came in 20th century, but the idea of existence is very old. Humankinds have been grappling with the questions of existence, and if you look at Christian mythos, you can talk about the existential existence of Adam and Eve, Saturn, and so many other characters. So, as I said, existence has been a primary concern to all the human beings, but this existence was philosophized tremendously only in 20th century. Let me give you certain existential questions or observations, and I would begin with Blaise Pascal. When I quote him, he says, "If you gain, you gain all. If you lose nothing. Wager then, without hesitation, that He exists, God." Is talking about God. Socrates and his very idea of know thyself, and one might well remember uh, uh, Alexander Pope and his famous couplet, "Know then thyself, presume not God to scan, the proper study of mankind is man." So I am simply giving you certain references, and you have to use your own existential position to make a rapport with all these things. Who can forget Shakespeare's oft quoted "to be or not to be" from Hamlet? Saint Augustine. Saint Augustine is a very seminal figure and we shall be talking about this man when we shall be starting with the Westland. So he says, there is no sanity in those whom anything in creation displaces his confessions. So again, he's talking about how God is everywhere and whatever the creations are, whatever God has created, they are finite, absolute, superb, unquestionable. So we have St. Augustine, we have seen Socrates, we have seen Pascal. Now let us talk about Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, and he opines something revolutionary. He says, I quote, "But friends, let me open my whole heart to you. If there were gods in existence, how could I endure not to be a god?" From Thus Spake Zarathustra. So, just you can feel the the questions of existence, the existential angst, the existential concerns in these statements. So, there are certain rudiments about this philosophy, and let us begin these one by one. So, the first one is essence precedes existence. Essence. If you talk about Aristotle, if you talk about his guru Plato and his guru Socrates, or even if you talk about, I mean, let us talk about these first. So they talk about in absolute power. They talk about something which is fixed, as you must be very much familiar with the very much the contention of Plato regarding the banishment of artists from his ideal society. So he talks about certain notions which are permanent, which are never shifted. Absolute, the forms, truth, beauty, and goodness. Essence, the concept of soul, the concept of oversoul, the concept of Garden of Eden, original sin. Right? So look at these concepts. If you look at your life, if you look at the lives around us, and the way religion has been interfering in our lives, we have been told, we have been reminded, we have been chastised time and again to think about essence, to think about soul, to think about our soul, to think about something which is independent of us, to think about something which is beyond the mundane realities. Essence precedes existence. So these, this in a way, what is more important here then? Do these essences play the most important role in terms of existence, or there is any possibility of survival of existence as well? Existence precedes essence. So, if you talk about the philosophical streams before existentialism, they all have laid their primary thirst on essence. But existentialism as a philosophy has reversed the process, has reversed the dictum. And now this philosophy says, no, existence precedes essence. And this is against rationalism. Rationalism which tries to talk about, which tries to capture, which tries to delineate, which tries to understand the whole of the world on the basis of the rationality, mind. And in turn that rationality or mind is nothing but the shadow of the God, the Absolute Himself. So this rationalism, yes, the rationalism talks about the centrality of human experience, centrality of human mind, but somewhere this experience, this human rationality is subservient to the concept of absolute, that powerful, which is beyond mundane and sensory experiences. I shall be talking about this rationalism more when we shall be discussing the play, the text, in a greater way. So, at this juncture, let me just quote one of the most important observations made by Charles Worth in his book, The Meaning of Existence, about the philosophy, this philosophy that is existentialism. It was, one could say, more an intellectual mood or atmosphere than a coherent creed of body. So please, I would ask you to concentrate on this very insightful observation made by Charles Worth. So he says, more an intellectual mood or atmosphere than a coherent creed or body of doctrine. So we simply cannot gather certain beliefs, certain certain systems or certain creeds, and then could put them together and which present as, look, this is the philosophy of existentialism. It's not like that. More an outlook of mindset than a philosophical party line. More a method of approach than a school of thought. And it was very much a creature of the West land. I'm talking about the West land. You know, T.S. the West land. That was Europe during and after the last World War. So if you have to pick out certain keywords, so lack or absence of coherent creed or body, it's a mindset than a philosophical party line. It's more about a method, more about an approach than a proper school of thought. And this came in the wake of the First, the Second World War that shocked the European, traditional European sensibilities. This philosophy is against the philosophy of idea and things which have been prevalent in traditional philosophy. What is this idea? So, idea of God, idea of soul, idea of absolute, idea of form, idea of truth, beauty and goodness, idea, essence. It doesn't matter whether one has practicalized, one has had, or one has have, or one will have the actual experience of the ideas in real sense of time. It doesn't matter. So we have simply been supplying ideas. God is there, soul is there, oversoul is there, form is there, original forms are there. There is hell, there is heaven, Jannat, Dozak, Swarg, Narak, transmigration of soul. So these are simply ideas. Nobody has seen these. Simply we have been supplied with the ideas traditionally and we have been made to believe as it is. We don't have to raise a question. We don't have to talk about what one thinks, what one thinks in terms of unique individual experience, that doesn't matter. So if I begin to question the very idea of God, then I shall be termed as an atheist, and I may be boycotted. I may not be given the due uh, 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 recognition. So my personal experience, my personal my personal thought, my personal lived experience doesn't matter. What matters most? The philosophy of idea. So this philosophy, this existentialism is against the philosophy of idea, the philosophy of things which have been prevalent in traditional philosophy. This philosophy questions, this philosophy talks about certain basic questions about life and death. Traditionally, whatever we have been supplied with, the idea that this life is given by God's grace, and we have to toil and moil, we have to indulge in certain strict lifestyle so that we can be reinitiated into the world above. So the questions of life and death. What is life? What is death? Is life beyond God? Is life beyond certain essentialization processes? What about death? Can I feel death personally? Or death is, as it has been exemplified, glorified, death of the body. Soul doesn't die. Who has seen the soul? Who has experienced soul? So the questions of life and death, meaning of human existence. Why am I here? What is my role? Who am I? So these are the questions, the relationship between God and man to man. So if you remember Paradise Lost, Milton, the famous lines, to justify the ways of God to man. So even in Paradise Lost, even in that 17th century, there has been a kind of urgency whereby John Milton has to write something to justify the ways of God to men. So God is being questioned, God is being bracketed, God is being underlined. And the questions of man to man, interpersonal relationship, the idea of choice, freedom, and responsibility. I shall talk of these terms later, while I shall be focusing on certain key thinkers of this philosophy. But for right now, the idea of choice. We are independent. We are free. And whatever the decisions one has to make, that decision shall be his or her own choice, leading to his or her own freedom. And this is what Jean-Paul Sartre he says that man is condemned to be free. And this freedom, this free state, this freeness brings lots of responsibilities at the same time. Traditional philosophy has simply been ignoring the authentic individual experience. Authentic individual experience. I mean, you can well put the question, what is authentic? So it's a very good question, but the question is more important. What is more important? A question in that way. So far, the human being has been denied to have any step towards the realization of authentic experience. Whatever has he been feeling, he is made to feel. Whatever he is doing, he is made to do through visible and invisible forces. So, in traditional philosophy, there is no space for authentic individual experiences. Concentration on actual lived human experience in a concrete sense. So, in a concrete sense, let us not simply dwell in certain abstractions. Let us not simply harbor in certain unknown facets of life. Let us not make it philosophical in that way. Let us not approach these questions from without. Let us not confront these essentials from outside. Let us involve our own sense of being, our own individual participation, and let us try to come up with certain actual lived human experience. Let us experience God personally. Let us experience soul personally. Let us try to talk about these essences in terms of personal experiences. Let us feel truth with capital T. Let us live beauty with capital P. Let us practice goodness with capital G. It's not simply truth, beauty, and goodness in terms of certain rhetoric, in terms of certain verbatim, in terms of certain words with capital W. It's not like that. So they talk about what? Actual lived human experience in a concrete sense. So, this is a brief initiation into the philosophy that is existentialism, and in some more lectures, videos, I shall be talking about indivisible existentialist philosophers in that way, so that we can make our understanding of this philosophy better, so that we can be in a good position to begin with the text waiting for